Greetings one and all. We're on Super Tuesdays here in the Holy Land, the Holy Apple, the Holy Hilltop, Tal Binyamin. Yes, you got it. We're a day and a half or so away from the joyous holiday of Purim. Welcome to our second part of our shocking revelation. Why are we celebrating Purim on the wrong day? Very, very important. Check out our first class. And our question then, and also today, it's our continuation, our part 2 here, is that two great, tremendous giants of Torah, Rav Shlomo Alkavetz and Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, the Meshech Chochma, the Or Sameach, asked that question. It seems like the holiday of Purim should be celebrated on the 13th of the month of Adar because of the fact that it's written in the Talmud, the tractate of Megillah, page 2, side A. Rashi also expands on this, that the majority of the miracle that took place during Purim happened on the 13th. The victory of the battles that the Jewish people defeated our enemies, the revenge, the turn of the tables, most of that took place on the 13th. So we should be celebrating on the 13th when we were victorious in battle against our enemies, and there was a turnabout that the Jews ruled over their enemies. That was their question. Their answer was that Jews do not rejoice or celebrate at the downfall of their enemies. Last week we discussed 4 different proofs within. We're just talking about proofs within the holiday of Purim to cast a doubt on the words of these tremendous sages. Once again, it's not taking away. This is the way the Torah. There are different opinions, and we are dust to their feet. We are nobody compared to these Torah giants. We are just bringing in the other Torah giants and trying to find our way here, clarify this question. Okay, so now on proof number 5, excuse me. Proof number 5. When we read the scrolls of Esther, we have 3 blessings at the beginning, and then we have a blessing at the end. When you look at the language of that blessing, you might be shocked, because we're thanking God for avenging and fighting our battles during the time of Purim. That sounds like a celebration of the downfall of our enemies, because if we wanted to, it does say there, the salvation of the Jewish people. You could have just said, we thank you, God, for bringing salvation, redemption to the Jewish people. Okay, beautiful. We don't get involved in vengeance. We don't get involved in God fighting our battles and destroying the enemies. But that's what it says. So this is a big question. This is a big point of refute to those tremendous Torah scholars that we mentioned. This could be found in the tractate of Megillah 21b. Now, in the Talmud, there is a dispute how the blessing should be worded. According to Rav Ashi says that we should add these words, that we thanking God who has fought our battles. We are thanking God that has judged the nations of the world. We are thanking God for avenging our fall before our enemies. We're thanking God for saving us. Rava comes around and says no. Rava says that we should not be thanking God. The ending of the blessing, according to Rav Ashi, is we bless you, God, that you have punished the enemies of the Jewish people. That's how the blessing ends. Rava comes and says, no, the blessing should be, thank you, God, that you have saved the Jewish people. Rav Papa comes and says, listen, I'm going to solve this dispute, and we're going to fuse the two together. And that's how the Jewish law is. So we include both. We include the salvation of the Jewish people, and we also include the downfall and the punishment and the vengeance against the nations of the world that came to destroy the Jewish people. Amazing. Rav Papa comes and he makes this match made in heaven. Now, the Talmud in Tractate Brachot, page 49, side A, tells us that we are not allowed to bring two subject matters, two issues in one blessing. When you say thank you, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech olam, thank you, O Lord, our God, we must thank God for one issue, for one subject. Don't bring in two. That is a principle, an accepted principle. When you're thanking God for something or saying a blessing, it should be one subject matter. If I'm asking God to bring me a speedy recovery because I don't feel well, I'm asking God, thank you, God, you are the source of healing. And when I want God to build Jerusalem, I'm going to ask Him one shot, one subject, one issue. Please, God, build the city of Jerusalem. Okay, so very interesting. Because according to Rav Papa, which is the law, which is what we do, check it out in your prayer books, we use both languages. We thank God for the salvation, that's one issue, and we thank God for the destruction of our enemies. Make up your mind. Is it a problem? Or perhaps it's not. Let's check it out. Our first source is the Jewish law book called Orchot Chaim on page 275. He writes there, even though it's written in Tractate Blessings Brachot 49a, it's written that you do not have two subject matters in a blessing. However, here it is not two issues, it is one issue. In order to reach the salvation of the Jewish people, we must avenge. We must destroy the enemies of the Jewish people. This is one. This is one issue. You can't have one without the other. So a complete Jew celebrates one issue. What is that issue? We celebrate, on one hand, the destruction of our enemies, their downfall. And on the other hand, that God lifted us up and saved us, the salvation of the Jewish people. These are two sides of one coin. That is the Orchot Chaim. Next, we have the commentator, the Korban Netanel on the Talmud tractate. We mentioned Megillah 21, side B. He writes here the following, that if these are not separate issues, these are not separate subjects. Why? Because of the fact that there's no such thing as a complete redemption without putting the lights out of the wicked. Got it? Amazing statement. Korban Netanel, the commentator, brings down an amazing idea. This is one idea. This is one issue, one subject matter. There is no complete salvation, one without the other. In order for the Jewish people to be saved, there is a need to put out the lights of the wicked. I think it's called TKO, if I'm not mistaken, a knockout. You know, Rocky. Next. Okay, the Khatam Sofer, in two different places, he really hits the ball out of the ballpark. I'm going to summarize. This is the Khatam Sofer. He has a commentary on the Talmud. This is once again based on the tractate that we quoted, Megillah 21, page 21, side B. He has two or three takes which are pretty much all the same direction of this Talmud about what blessing, what after blessing do we say after finishing the scrolls of Esther. I will summarize his words. Okay, so I take that back. The Khatam Sofer is on the Talmud, but it's talking about, it's on the page of Tractate of Sabbath 21b. Interesting, same page, but different tractate. Okay? Now, let's get it straight. A little bit of the background. What is the Talmud in Sabbath 21b talking about? There is a dispute between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. How do we light the candles of Hanukkah? According to Beit Hillel, on the first day we have one candle, second day 2, 3, 4, and it goes up 1 to 8. According to the house of Shammai, they go the opposite direction. 8, the first night of Hanukkah, we light 8 candles, the next 7, third night 6, and so forth, until the last night. You know, you like those pictures, you know, those beautiful pictures of the 8th night, you know, all the candles are lit up. You know, we're lucky that we didn't go according to Shammai here, because you would have on the 8th day just like one little guy, you know. So we're lucky. So, the Talmud tells us that in Lebanon, in the city of, I hope I'm saying this correctly in English, in Sidon, in Hebrew it's called Sidon, I hope that's called Sidon. In Tzvi, is that okay? Sidon? You're the master here. There were two sages, two elders. One of them in Lebanon would light candles 1 to 8, like Beit Hillel, and another scholar or elder would light 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, like the house of Shammai. What is going on? Why is the Talmud telling us this story about these two sages or two elderly people, one lighting the candle like the house of Hillel and the other? What is it coming to teach us? So listen closely. The focus of the house of Shammai is on the downfall of our Jewish enemies. This is why we've given a class on this in previous years. The connection between Hanukkah and Sukkot, the holiday of tabernacles, the tremendous connection. So we know that by the holiday of Sukkot, the Jews take 70 bulls, not in one day, and we're not talking about the Chicago bulls. We take 70 bulls total for the 7 days of Sukkot, and every day we start with 13, go down to 12, 11. Why? So the Talmud tells us that this is a sign that as history progresses, the strength of the nations begin to descend, and that is the bulls representing the nations of the world, the bulls representing the nations of the world, and they are on a decline. So the house of Shammai, their focus on the holiday of Hanukkah is more on the downfall of the nations, and that is represented just like on Sukkot, where we go the first day 13, the next day 12, and we keep on declining. The same is true when it comes to the holiday of Hanukkah. We are celebrating the downfall of our enemies, and therefore the same order, 8, 7, 6, 5, etc. On the other hand, Hillel, the house of Hillel, they are concentrating, their focus is on the salvation, the liberation of the Jewish people during the time of Hanukkah. So therefore, as the days progressed, the salvation was even greater, the miracles even greater. So their order is from 1 to 3 and going up. So the Chatam Sofer says, what happened? These two elders of Sidon, they got together and said, you know what? Just like Rav Papa did when it comes to the reading of the scrolls of Esther, when we have the end blessing, and we combine both Rav Ashi and also Rava, when we combine both these opinions together, because they combine, they form a, when we fuse them together, they produce a complete, wholesome Jew. And therefore, that is what the agreement between these two elders in Lebanon, they wanted to perform the commandment of lighting the candles of Hanukkah in a perfect, complete form. So how do you do that? Because both are correct. The house of Shammai is correct when he says we focus on the downfall of our enemies, and also the house of Hillel is correct when we focus on the salvation of the Jewish people. So these two elders, these two scholars, in their brilliance, combined the two together. One lit the Hanukkah candles like the house of Hillel, and the other lit the candles like Beit Shammai, both of them in a joint effort to form a complete, Jew. So this is the beautiful work, and once again, it's definitely worthwhile to check out the words of the Chatam Sofer, and he brings this once again in about 2 or 3, definitely 2, perhaps 3 places on Tractate Shabbat. Next, we know that it says in the Talmud, it says that a Jew has to celebrate on Purim, if I'm not mistaken, on page 15. It says that a Jew must celebrate on Purim until he does not differentiate between Haman and Mordechai. Now this is really unusual. You got to be really plastered, got to be bombed, shelled, in order to not differentiate between the good guys and the bad guys. You know, whatever happened to that saying, can't let the bad guys win. So I'm supposed to drink I'm supposed to intoxicate myself on Purim, so I don't know the difference? That is hard to swallow. So folks, this is brought down in the commentary of the Gra, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, who lived approximately 300 years ago. And the idea is the following. I'm going to bring it down here. Okay, oh, got it. What does this mean? So, the book B'Shem Omro, on page 597, on the commentary of the scrolls of Esther. He asked this question, and he gives us an unbelievable answer in the name of the book Bina Li'itim. He writes the following: what does it mean that a person will not be able to differentiate between the evil Haman and the righteous Mordechai? You know what it means, folks? We will not know what is greater during the miracles of Purim. What was a greater miracle? What was a greater event? The uplifting, the turnaround, where the Jewish people ruled over their enemies, where the Jewish people were all of a sudden saved from being annihilated, or perhaps the downfall and the destruction of Jewish enemies. Which miracle is greater, the salvation of the Jewish people or the destruction of our enemies? So the idea of Purim is that you must reach the conclusion. You have not done your duty until you come out of Purim with the conclusion that I don't know. I don't know the difference between the salvation of Mordechai and the downfall of Haman and our enemies. I don't know which one is greater. So in other words, dear friends, what we're saying here is that both of them are equal. Both of them are equal. And that's why this blessing that we say, the final blessing after we read the scrolls of Esther, it fuses these two ideas. But we said you're not allowed to have two issues in one blessing. But they're not two issues. They're one issue. They're one coin with two sides. And for a Jew, you must exit the holiday of Purim with the realization, with the understanding, the Torah focus on life, understanding that there is no difference. They are both one issue. We need both of them. We need the uplifting of the Jewish people, but we also need the destruction of the evil, because the destruction of the evil is a sanctification of God's name. To see that there is, if you start up with God's people, there is a price and you're going to pay for it. We see God's hand, so to speak. This is a sanctification of God's name. They go hand in hand. The destruction and the uplifting of the Jewish people through the destruction are one. Next, number 6. We have in the Tractate of Sanhedrin on page 64, side B, we have a discussion in the tractate. There was a custom back in ancient day where parents would, so to speak, sacrifice their children. Now, there was certain ceremonies that they would actually sacrifice their kids, as like meaning like they would sacrifice, they would put them on an altar, or they would burn them to various foreign gods. But there's also a ceremony which involved taking one's child and going from side to another side with a fire somewhere in the middle. But it was not necessarily to kill the kids. Once again, there's different ideas, different opinions on this, but many say that this is a separate issue. This was not a child sacrifice. Now, we should know that up until today, check it out, you could look it up, there are still, to this very day, there are hundreds of thousands of kids who disappear, and there are still today sacrifices of children, children's sacrifices. Check it out if you doubt us.
There's still Moloch worship.
Right, so that's what we're talking about, the Moloch. Okay, so there is a dispute in the Gemara how exactly this ceremony was done. So, Rava says the following. Rava says the following, that the way that this ceremony went is the following. Person would pick up their child, and in the middle there was a fire, a bonfire, and they would jump from side to side. There was some kind of rope and like a chain or a ring at the top, and a person would, if you remember the old days, you would go on a train or a bus, they would have some kind of handle you would hold on to so you didn't fall if you were standing up on a bus. So something like that, they would be going from side to side. They would have in one hand their child, and in the other hand they would grab this ring with the handle, and they would jump from side to side. This was the ceremony. Okay. Now, what is that called? And this is how was brought down to Jewish law. This is Rava's opinion. This is how it was done. That was brought down into Jewish law by Maimonides. So what is it called? It is called, in the words of the Gemara, it's called Namshvarta de Puraya. It is called the Jumping of Purim. It's really interesting. The ceremony is called the Jumping of Purim. Once again, folks, we're in the Tractate of Tribunal Justice, punishments given out to offenders who transgress the Torah. What is going on here? What is this ring or rope of Purim? What is it talking about? Let's investigate this. Okay, the Megillat Starim is a book that is mentioned a few times in the Talmud. So this is a real ancient source. And also, the Gaonim, Otzar Gaonim. This is brought down in the Tractate of Megillah, page 7, side B. What do they tell us about why is this ceremony named after something that happens on Purim, jumping over fires? Let's look. What is it talking about here? Okay, listen closely. There is a custom in Babylonia and Elam, that the teenagers, the young men, they make an effigy of Haman 4 or 5 days before the holiday of Purim. They hang it on their roofs, and in the day of Purim they make a gigantic bonfire and they throw the effigy of Haman into the fire, and they pour salt on the fire, which makes a kind of crackling, Rice Krispies kind of noise. And the young men that are around begin to sing and are joyful. And there is a ring connecting, there's a ring on top of the fire that was used to hang the effigy of Haman into the fire, and the young men swing from one side of the fire holding on to the rope and the ring of the effigy of Haman, and one after another begin the celebration. That's very interesting. Celebrating. This goes back to the days of the Talmud. When the Talmud tells us about this Purim ring, that is what it's talking about. I just quoted you sources from 1,000 years ago. But this is brought down in the Talmud. This book is brought down, the Megillat Starim is brought down in the Talmud. Not only that, it is also brought down in more modern, so to speak. If we look in the Code of Jewish Law, the Tur on the Code of Jewish Law, 690, paragraph 4, chapter 690, paragraph 4, the Darkei Moshe brings down this custom that is prevalent. I was talking about this to a friend of mine in Elon Moreh. He's a person who's approximately 70 years old, and he told me, Yudah, I can't believe you just said that. For many, many years when I was a kid, we made this effigy of Haman. He's originally from Persia. We have this effigy of Haman that we hang up on our roofs, and then we make a bonfire and we sing every night of Purim. The night of Purim, every year, we sing. And I never understood. I haven't done this for many, many years. Since I, became a teenager and I went my own way, I never continued. I didn't know that there was anything behind. I didn't know it's in the Talmud, this famous Purim ring that the youth would sing and dance and swing themselves. I guess that's what you could call a Jewish swinger. That's a good Jewish swinger, though. In celebration. And he was really moved. Imagine that. Like you did something for many years and you think your parents maybe it's just something that they made up. Then all of a sudden you hear it brings you back to times of the Talmud. It's amazing. So the Darkei Moshe brings it down, and many, many other Jewish law authorities also bring this down. Our seventh proof on celebrating at the downfall of our enemies is very, very short, to look at other holidays. So, let me start straight out. There is mentioned many times in the Talmud a scroll called Megillat Ta'anit. Megillat Ta'anit is a book that was put together approximately 100 years before the destruction of the Second Temple. This is ancient. And in there are compiled many Jewish holidays and sometimes fasts that took place at the time of the Second Temple. Once again, 100 years before the destruction of the Second Temple. We're talking about 2100 years ago. And in there, we could have a separate class on dissecting different Jewish days on the calendar, which were set aside by our sages to celebrate the downfall of Jewish enemies, of wicked representatives, wicked nations, or wicked representatives of nations. Could spend a whole class just bringing one after another, one after another. It's full of celebrating. These are dates where Jewish people celebrate. Today, unfortunately, we only have the holiday left of Hanukkah. The holiday left of Hanukkah from the Megillat Ta'anit and Purim. These are two that we have left. Everything else is no longer binding. But the book exists, the dates exist, anyone could check them out. That's number one. Number two, Passover. Passover. We have the Lubavitcher Rebbe writes, the one source that I can't find. So I'm going to say it. 1 second. Along with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, there are many, many sources that... Oh, excuse me. Now I just see where I put it. 1 second. Lubavitcher Rebbe writes in Torah Or on the second book of holidays, page 98. The crux of the Passover holiday is the celebration on the eve of the 15th when the firstborn were punished. That is when and why we bring the Paschal lamb. Listen very closely what the Rebbe is saying. We celebrate. Every Jew, most Jews, sit down on the 15th day of the month of Nisan. What happened at that day, 3,300 years ago, plus? On Passover, when the Jewish people were redeemed from slavery, what happened? On that night, that same night that we're out there celebrating, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating the downfall of the firstborn. And if you think that the firstborn, it was rare, it says in the Torah itself that there was no house that did not have some type of firstborn in it. Some type of firstborn. So every single house in Egypt had at least 1, 2, 3, if not more, people that were killed. And that is the night, I don't understand. We make this big holiday of Passover on the night of the 15th, the night where tens of thousands of Egyptians fell. Tens of thousands of Egyptians fell? That doesn't sound, up until this class, that might not sound too Jewish. But as we've seen in these two-part series, it is very Jewish. The Paschal lamb itself is in your face to the enemies of Israel. What did it involve? The lamb was the god of the Egyptians, was one of the gods of the Egyptians, to take their God in their face and to slaughter them on the 15th night of Nisan, the night of Passover. That, the only example I could give up to date, which to understand the ramifications, it would be today to take a Quran and go and invite Fox News and CNN and Drudge Report, invite them all, and then take the Quran and burn it in the square, in downtown, wherever, Los Angeles, whatever city, whatever state, country you're interested. Imagine that. I mean, there'd probably be some kind of jihad that the Muslims would come up with. Imagine, okay, not one person taking a Quran. Imagine a nation of people taking the Quran and burning it. That is the exact, okay, that is perfect example of what happened on the night of the 15th. The God of the Egyptians, in their front of their eyes, in front of their face, in your face, was slaughtered. So, that is why the holiday, the crux, that's what the Rebbe says, the crux of the holiday is on this first day, and it is based on the destruction of the firstborn, and it's based on the slaughtering of the lamb of the foreign god of the Egyptians. Comes also the Chatam Sofer. Chatam Sofer also writes in Torat Moshe HaShalem on volume 2, Exodus, page 188. I summarize the words of the Chatam Sofer. On Passover we celebrate the day of the battles. The first battle, the first day, was when the smiting of the firstborn. The seventh day was the drowning of the Egyptians and the splitting of the sea for the Jewish people. Chatam Sofer is telling us the base, the foundation of the holiday of Passover is, we know that the major foundations of every holiday, you look at Sukkot, the holiday of celebration of the booths. You have the first day, which is a day like Sabbath. You're not allowed to do various forms of working. And the last day, the seventh or eighth day, the last day of Sukkot, is also connected, also like Sabbath. These are the two foundations of Sukkot. The same is, the Chatam Sofer brings, that this is the same situation in Passover. You have a foundation. You have a person stands on two legs. So Passover and all the Jewish holidays, they stand on these two legs. Two legs is the first day, is the defeat, the destruction of the firstborn. It is the slaughtering of the god of the Egyptians. And on the seventh day is the total destruction and defeat of the Egyptians drowning in the Red Sea. That is the crux. Comes the Chatam Sofer and tells us an amazing lesson. He asked the question we asked at the beginning: why in the world are we celebrating the holiday of Purim on the 14th? We should be celebrating on the 13th. That was the day that the Jews avenged against the nations of the world. Listen to the words. Chatam Sofer says, in the source that I just brought, that Mordechai and Esther had to make a decision here. What day to establish, or what days to establish the holiday of Purim? And they were worried, because it seemed like the best day would be on the 13th, because of the fact that even the Jews of the walled city Shushan, even the Jews of Shushan joined forces on the 13th to prepare for a battle against the nations. They prepared themselves in prayer. They prepared themselves in fasting. So this would be a very unifying day to make Purim. However, they specifically, on purpose, they did not decide to make it on the 13th. Why? Because they were worried when the Jews would be celebrating, all of the Jews worldwide would be celebrating on Purim, drinking, eating, getting drunk a little bit. What would it be with the study of Torah? We know that if there's a minute without a second, without the study of Torah, the world will cease to exist. So therefore they were worried. So they decided, they made a conscious decision not to make the holiday on the 13th. Not because it didn't deserve, not because our enemies fell and we don't rejoice. No! Because they didn't want there to be a situation where the Jewish people are all celebrating and a lot of them are not learning. So what did they do? They divided it up. Some Jews will celebrate on the 14th. When the Jews on the 14th of Adar are celebrating, so the Jews on the 15th, it's not Purim for them. They will learn. And on the 15th, we have a group of people that they're partying, and therefore the 14th, the Jews on the 14th, they are the ones that are studying. They will be the ones that are studying Torah on the 15th. So this way, according to the Khatam Sofer, that was the reason that Mordechai and Esther decided not to make the holiday on the 13th. Now, with God's help, got to give me a blessing here. Next year, I have it right here before me, but we're not going to be able to do it this year. I have a separate class. Let's just summarize. We've summarized to see that within the holiday of Purim, we see 7 issues where we see the Jews are celebrating. The holiday does represent celebrating the downfall of our enemies. Okay, that's fine. But we still have a question. If we really celebrate the downfall of our enemies, why don't we have the holiday on the 13th? That was our question, right? Okay, we've established that Jews do celebrate at the downfall of our enemies. We've established it from the holiday, within the holiday of Purim itself, with all various customs and Jewish laws and practices. We've seven proofs. And within the 7 proofs, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sources. Okay, we're talking about 50 sources here. But still remains the question. Okay, if we celebrate the downfall of enemy, I'm in. I'm with you. I'm gung-ho, I'm with you. But then why? Still, if the miracles took place and the battles took place on the 13th, why do we put it off to the 14th? Come back next year. You could touch that dial. But just remember, God willing, we should all be healthy, that next year, hopefully, in the Temple Mount the class will be. Why don't we celebrate Purim on the 14th?